Welcome to Load the Box. We are not taking this week off after a difficult loss. Jordan, how was Paycor Stadium on Saturday afternoon?
It was very nice. I only caught flack towards the end of the game from strangers, but my Bengals fans that I went with, were giving it to me regularly as they made that comeback. But that is okay. I expected that from them. Pretty cowardly, I will say, of the female that told me to sit my behind, but she didn't say behind down, after the Bengals got that big play in overtime. Like talk your smack when you're down 17, not when you're about to kick the game-winning field goal. Let's keep it even. And so I did stout a little bit of a who they think gonna miss them playoffs chant at the Bengals fans. I was still reveling in that. And then Philly went and lost to Seattle, and that really puts a damp on my whole well, at least the Vikings are going to make the playoffs argument, because now it's dicey for the Vikings. We're going to have to take control and might not be able to limp in as much. But I'm sure we'll talk about those things as the show progresses.
Yeah, as you would imagine, these last couple of days, that's like what everyone's been asking the coaches and the players, something along those lines. This is final 3-game stretch, all division opponents, obviously all conference opponents. It matters greatly in terms of the postseason picture. The questions of how do you feel about this? Do you look ahead to week 17 already? Do you think about playing the Lions in week 18 and holding back some of the game plan and all that? And I mean, the answers are very simple from the coaches and the players. They're basically, well, we got to beat the Lions first for any of that to matter. So it's, yeah, I mean, the Vikings are now in this position because of a blown 14-point lead against Cincinnati. It was very strange. I don't know, if your perspective was different being at the game, but watching the game from my couch, drinking 7-Up because I was not feeling well. The Vikings did not make me feel any better, but it was very strange to see a defense that had been so lights out for about a month and hadn't given up nothing resembling offensive success since, honestly, like the Atlanta game. And just to get scored on 3 straight drives, all for touchdowns, to force overtime. It was just strange to watch, sort of just these porous holes sort of just opening up in the middle of the field. And I didn't get the missed tackles number from the game, but it felt like there were some key missed tackles and spots as well. And I don't know, what was your perspective being at the game on the way in which the defense sort of, I don't know, kind of crumbled a little bit in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I think what I noticed, and some of this was reflection after the fact, but I feel like the Bengals did a good job of neutralizing the pass rush and the blitz elements that the Vikings wanted to bring. I feel like a lot of what the Bengals, and this isn't since Joe Burrow got hurt, this was kind of Bengals fans' gripe when they had Joe Burrow, in the lineup. It's a lot of quick passes. It was a lot of quick slants over the middle. And then as soon as we started, beefing up in the middle to take that away, they started dumping the ball off on a swing route or a screen or something like that. And they would get, one of their skill position guys, one of the running backs, that Chase Brown guy who's he runs a million miles an hour, I guess. They'd get him in space, and then it felt like it was just a free 7 yards. And so I thought they did a good job of neutralizing that. I mean, obviously, I think Daniil Hunter had 2 sacks in the game. There were, it felt like countless plays where Jake Browning was running for his life and then threw a YOLO ball that T. Higgins came down with. But, yeah, man, I mean, it is. There used to be in the Buffalo time, back in the pre-Will days, We would always talk about how there was a lack of complementary football going on in Minnesota. Well, the defense would go out and they'd give you a 3-point performance, and the offense would do nothing with it, and they would lose 3-0. And obviously, that's a little potent after 2 weeks ago we won a game 3-0. But just that kind of stuff. The defense would give up 10, and the offense would give you 6, and it was like, well, we needed you to get 13. And then this week, the offense goes out and they give you 24 points. But this is the week where the defense, breaks and gives up 27, most of it coming in the fourth quarter, and then the 3 in overtime. So it was frustrating to see that lack of complementary football. Where it would have been nice if the Vikings had this 24-point game in them in Denver against Chicago instead of against Cincinnati. But I'm going to be honest, I really felt like the game was over. In 2 spots. It was in overtime both times, but it was when the Vikings had, they got the ball in overtime, like after the punt. I was like, oh, they just need a field goal. Cool. Like I didn't
30 yards.
Yeah, I didn't want to I didn't want to call game. I wasn't saying like ball game, dagger. You guys are cooked. I wasn't talking my stuff, but I had some confidence. I was like, okay, 1 drive, a field goal drive. Let's get it offense. You guys have been looking pretty good today, and those back-to-back tush pushes were just almost inexcusable by Kevin O'Connell. And if you guys listen to this show, you probably consume other Vikings media, so I'm sorry for regurgitating a take that's been said over and over again, but a tush push with Nick Mullins, who has had back surgery, with Brandon Powell, one of the smallest guys in the league, as the pusher. What are we doing? What I was positive on 4th and inches, it was some trickeration. There was going to be a pitch. There was going to be a throw. There was going to be something to spice it up, and there just wasn't. And we just ran out a quarterback who was dealing with a back injury, was on injured reserve because of his back earlier this season, and we said, go get, yards on a QB sneak with, a 5'7" guy pushing behind you. And it's like, that's nothing. And I think my camera's froze up. So I'll try to get that fixed. But the other time I thought we had won the game was on that punt where I can't remember the gunner that shoved him. Was it Tristan Jackson? Najee Thompson. That's who it was. Najee Thompson shoved the Bengal into another Bengal and caused a fumble, or what should have been a fumble, but then the Vikings didn't get it, and there was some heartbreak in that game for sure. But yeah, it just felt like the defense didn't have it for whatever reason, and the offense did, and you wish that we could get in sync a little bit this late in the season.
Yeah, complementary football thing is a real. It's why it's always talked about, right? I mean, it's so hard to put all 3 phases together, let alone the main 2 phases together consistently. I mean, that's what makes you a great team, right? And it's this really disappointing thing to think about, like how this team, has one of the best offensive lines in football in some categories, and in others not so much. But when it comes to pass blocking, they're very good. They have a very good defense, generally speaking, and this is the year the Vikings lose their quarterback. There's just some of that where it's like no breaks have been caught. But in terms of this game, I think the other thing that just needs to be pointed out is the 2 interceptions by Nick Mullins were, to use that same word, inexcusable. They just can't happen in those spots. Even if both of those plays, the interception at the goal line and then the fumble/interception that happened a couple drives later, even if both of those ended in sacks or both ended in incomplete passes, you get 2 field goals.
Yep.
And you're up 13-3 at halftime. And that game looks a lot different down the stretch, more than likely. And so when you're put in that position as a team, That's not just Nick Mullins' fault. I think, as coaches and players will often say, every player is responsible on the offense for when a turnover happens to some degree. It's not just a one person thing. Unless it's, somebody running down the side of the field and just drops the ball, and then, that's maybe a little bit different. But when it's an interception, there's more than just one person at fault in those scenarios. But when you put yourself in that position, it makes the rest of the game so much harder. You have to execute perfectly. There's no real margin for error at that point when you're basically just giving away 6 points. So, apart from those 2 plays and maybe the plays that led up to them, as Kevin O'Connell has talked about this week, how a penalty or a negative play led to those interceptions, the plays prior. Apart from those few sequences, a very clean game on offense, but it wasn't enough because of the magnitude of those issues, and it forces perfection the rest of the game, and that just isn't really. It's not a recipe for success when you're playing your 4th quarterback of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, and this, I don't want to get away from the Bengals game per se, but this is Mo, in the void. This isn't really Lions talk. This isn't really Bengals talk. I would like to see Jalen Hall. At this point, Nick Mullins just went out there and played some of the most it football I've ever seen, which I can appreciate if we are tanking. But if the goal is to make the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game, Nick Mullins ain't it. I just think even he had the touchdown to Addison, both of them were to Addison, but the longer one, it was kind of like it was a badly thrown ball that Addison kind of scooped and then just ran with it, and it was like, okay, cool, that's fun. Then the second one, I was 100% positive was an interception watching it live. I was like, yeah, we just threw a third red zone pick, and Addison comes down with it, and Mullins was talking in the post game. He was like, I was thinking about it like boxing out in basketball, and I was like, with Jordan Addison as the box out guy, that is like asking, little Isaiah Thomas to box out somebody in the NBA, not the good Isaiah Thomas, like the one that had, in Boston.
Small, short one.
Yeah, the little one. That's just crazy to me that we're asking that guy to do the box out, and it worked out, and I'm glad that it worked out, but it's just those kinds of game time decisions where I don't know that the drop off from Nick Mullins / Josh Dobbs down to Jalen Hall would be that crazy or that much of a discrepancy. And I know Kwesi, I think, said in one of his press conferences after the Dobbs trade that him and Kevin had a conversation when they first got to Minnesota about wanting to play meaningful games. They never wanted to play a meaningless game in Minnesota. Okay, that's cool. You can all these games still mean something. We're not punting on the season. There's 3 games to go. We've seen Nick Mullins. It didn't look extraordinary. Let's just say the highs were still yikes, and the lows were extra yikes. And we've seen Josh Dobbs crumble over the last month. I think it's just time to pull the trigger, go to the rookie. Worst case scenario, okay, he's not very good. He was a 5th round pick. You can go back to Mullins against Green Bay and stout him the rest of the season, and maybe you get to 9 wins and you make the playoffs. Best case scenario, I keep saying this because this is the best comp I can think of. What is he, Sam Howell? He's a kind of competent quarterback who can do some things. He's not, I'm not going to say best case scenario is he's Patrick Mahomes and he lights up the league. No, I'm going to say best case scenario, he's like Sam Howell and he's competent and he shows some, he's got some what's the word, some utzpah or whatever it's called, and he leads you to the playoffs. Maybe he wins you a game, and then maybe we're talking in April, instead of trading future picks to move up and get a quarterback, maybe we're talking about what defensive tackle we really like that can change the state of the D-line, or what offensive guard we should trade down into the second, get Mo pick. It just changes the conversation if he actually is good. And I don't think he showed anything in that game against Atlanta that proved he's not an NFL quarterback. He didn't look like he was in over his head. He didn't look like he was, overmatched by the level of speed and NFL competition, whatever you want to call it. He looked competent out there for 2 drives, and then he got his head bounced off the turf. So I would like to see him get another chance, and I'm afraid that we're just not going to this season because Kevin O'Connell wants to have a winning record, and he thinks Nick Mullins is the best way to do that. What do you think about the quarterback situation?
Yeah, I disagree. I think I could get on board with Jaren Hall. Like I wouldn't throw a fit. I mean, at this point, you could start Justin Jefferson, and it'd be like, well, sure. I mean,
Right.
we got who else do we got? But I think with Nick Mullins, that game on Saturday, yes, he had too many pull your hair out plays. Like the 2 interceptions, obviously. The first touchdown to Addison, I was okay with because it was a 3rd down play. He's getting rocked.
Yeah.
You throw the ball where he threw the ball, only Addison could have caught that. It's not like he threw it up for grabs. The touchdown to Addison in the 4th quarter was arguably his worst decision of the day, in my opinion. It was a 1st and goal from the 2, and as he's rolling out, I'm on my couch just screaming at him to throw it into the stands because nobody was open. 4 or 5 Bengals were about to eat him alive, and he decided on 1st down rather than live to see 3 more plays. He made a hero play, and so all those things are true, and there were too many moments like that on Saturday. But I think for the vast majority of that game, level of just command of the offense and the zip with which he throws the ball, and it's night and day from what Josh Dobbs did.
Agreed.
And don't get me wrong, I'm a Josh Dobbs appreciator. I am very appreciative of what he did in those few games that he played.
Right.
Apart from the Chicago game, but I think Mullins has been here before, and I think I know what I'm getting with him, and I'm okay with what I get from him. Now, if he continues to do this on Sunday and it's, a ton of hero plays and he's throwing more interceptions in the red zone, I could have that conversation about Jaren Hall. But the other thing that I think about with this is how much more change can this team withstand? They've already made quarterback changes 3 times. Cousins to Hall, Hall to Dobbs, Dobbs to Mullins, and do we need to do it again? And they've done a good job for the most part, sort of stemming the tide with that. But how much more can they handle? Being resilient is one thing, but having to deal with it, sort of self-inflicted, is another thing.
Right.
So I don't disagree wholeheartedly, but generally speaking, I think the way that Dobbs commanded the game and played and was in rhythm on time most of the game, I liked what he did. I mean, he threw for over 300 yards, had a 100 passer rating, had some really good moments. So
yeah,
generally speaking, I like Mullins moving forward.
I should specify this is not a Nick Mullins played so bad that we have to see what this is. Nick Mullins played fine. It's almost like, and it's not a tank take. You can't really say it's a tank take whenever it's, there's 3 games to go in the season and the Vikings.
No, there's no point in that.
Yes, yeah. They're almost like a 500 football team. They're a game, 2 games that you can't really go 500 anymore in the NFL, but they're like a game or 2 away from being just at or right below 500. So it really is just seeing what you have for the future, as well as hey, maybe if Hall did light that spark and he did, let's say he was all the upside with a little less of the downside. Also, Nick Mullins is a human being. he could have just had kind of an off day. It was his first stout in God knows how long. He could have just been a little bit of like antsy. His wife is in the crowd. His son is watching him play for the first time. Like, there could have been some, I have to go out here and do it all. And I'm sure O'Connell, every snap that he takes in practice this week is like, hey, Nick, you see how on this play you didn't play hero ball? Let's not do that again. Do you remember Cincinnati? Do you remember the 2 interceptions? Let's not do that. We have foul downs to get a touchdown. We don't have to throw a jump ball to one of our smaller wide receivers in triple, quadruple coverage. We can live to see second and third down. This will be my last take on the Bengals. I thought Kevin O'Connell, and I've kind of been, I made a tweet that I'm now going to live by, that I get 48 hours grace or 24 hours grace on the backside of games to kind of apologize. Just don't take me seriously during games. I've came down hard on O'Connell this season because I've thought that, frankly, and this is the blunt, buzzword that I've been using, is coward. He's been coaching like a coward in some of these situations, and maybe it was because they were in primetime games. I did not think he coached like a coward. I thought he coached like a bozo in this game. I mean, Ty Chandler had like 120 rushing yards, or it might have been more than that. He was just gashing them all day long, and I'm not saying that you go out there and you run the ball 70 times with Ty Chandler, but I am saying you have to draw up a better play than tush push on 3rd and inches and 4th and inches. And if you know you're going to go for it on 4th down, why is 3rd down not a shot? Why is 3rd down not a play-action shot to Jefferson in probably single coverage? It makes no sense. It had me pounding my head against the concrete wall that I was sitting next to. I was so confused why that wasn't the, like if he would have punted there, I was like, okay, he's playing for a tie. No, he just did the same play twice, and then you had Brian Flores calling for a time, wanting to call a timeout on that second to last play, which just convinces me he's gone. He's a head coach already. I don't know where it's at, but he is a head coach. He's gonna go be a head coach. That was the moment. That was the Mike Zimmer grabbing Cousins and trying to fight back during, after the game. Like that moment where it was like, oh, this is done. Like this is not. Mike Zimmer's gone. That was my moment for that. Like when Brian Flores is begging for a timeout because he knows this play won't work. Oh man, it was terrible. But I thought Kevin O'Connell had a bad day.
So I'm not going to let you get off the hook for just saying all those things, so I need to respond.
That's fair. No, 100%. I expect
I 100% agree. Don't do 2 tush pushes. Like, what are we doing here? From thinking about why, I understood, I agree, hindsight, take a shot on 3rd down, or at least, throw a pass, do something different. Or if you do it on 3rd down, like you're saying, fake the push, toss it to Chandler on the outside, and let him just beat the guy to the corner. Anyway, hindsight's 2020. It's easy to say all that. However, on the 3rd down play, I did understand it because I noticed earlier in the game, I think it was the very first drive of the game, I think Mullins had 2 sneaks for a 1st down on 3rd and half a yard or whatever.
Yeah.
And I noticed in that moment, O'Connell is not messing around with a backup quarterback. When he smells the opportunity just to get a 1st down and reset the chains, he's going to do it.
That's fair.
And so that's what I appreciated from the first call. And then after that, I was like, okay, don't do it again. And then they did it again and it didn't work. So all that being said, probably don't do that again. The timeout thing, I saw that blowing up on Twitter too. And I think that's just the classic case of fans making a bigger deal out of something that isn't there, because asked after the game what was going on there, and you can see it too. After the second pan out of the camera, Flores walked away. He was walking away. They were no longer having that conversation because what Flores was telling him, based on what O'Connell said after the game, was, hey, think about calling a timeout here to challenge the spot, or to make them look at the spot. You can't challenge in overtime, but call a timeout to make them look at the spot. But in that moment, they also got word from upstairs that they'd already looked at the spot. So at that point, they both were like, okay, whatever, let's go. So I think for us to sit here and say that he was yelling at O'Connell to change the play call, I think is sort of presumptive of us to think that that's what he was doing.
Right.
So all that being said, it doesn't make O'Connell a better or worse coach. I just think it negates sort of this idea that Brian Flores thinks Kevin O'Connell's a bad coach and all
Yeah,
that. And so
I did a bad. I shouldn't have used the Mike Zimmer and Cousins almost getting on in a fist fight on national TV. That was a bad, because I didn't think there was any like bad blood there. I just thought that was like Brian Flores saying like, hey, maybe use a timeout here. And maybe, it's for the spot. Maybe it's because, Flores sees that the Bengals have like somehow all 11 defenders stacked over the center. And it's like, hey, maybe use a timeout here. And then, like you said, it wasn't like, Flores was screaming like, you dumb MFO, use a timeout right now. You're blowing my season. Like, it wasn't anything. Yeah. But I do think Flores wanted a timeout in that spot. Whether it be for the spot, I personally, and this is conspiracy theorist to me, I think that it was so that way they could look at the spot. I think that is the cover up for the story. I do think Flores was like, hey, use a timeout. They're stacking over Yosinto. This isn't going to be a success. I think Flores kind of saw that. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, that is what was said. Use a timeout kind of as a challenge to see if they'll overturn the spot. I do appreciate O'Connell in the post-game presser being like, I thought he got it, but, and then he said something, like he said he thought Mullins got it on third down, and then later he was like, yeah, we needed to pick up 2 yards, and the ref said that we didn't. And I was like, oh, okay. So we did. You're saying, no, we got the yards we needed. The refs just said no. And so maybe that's another reason why O'Connell calls the same play, because he thought it worked. He thought it was a success. And so he was like, okay, it worked once, just go do the same thing. But like you said, hindsight's always going to be 2020. We're already way over the allotted time for the Bengals game. I should have known I was going to blabber about this game. I was in attendance.
You were in attendance.
It was a hoot.
Let's talk about our friendly neighborhood Lions, shall we? It was interesting. I heard Matt Daniels say today that they really like these guys. Like I think the way he talked about them was like, they're just like, they're great dudes, this Lions organization, and they love getting together and playing against them because they're just good men. But then he very quickly was like, but they're nasty on the field. And so like he kind of changed his tune into one of being like, all right, yeah, but F them, we gotta go beat the snot out of them on Sunday. I don't have a ton of, I feel like I really went deep into the analysis stuff for the Bengals game, trying to look at matchups, trying to look at tendencies and stuff. I did a little bit of that with the Lions for sure. But I feel like when it gets to a division game, and granted they haven't played the Lions yet, but there's a little bit less. I mean, there's a lot of familiarity, and so there's a little bit less of looking at the numbers, looking at the tendencies, looking at this and that. It's who can be more physical and who can make the plays. It's there's less about trying to surprise the other person. It's who has it that day more so than the other team, and frankly, in a lot of ways, who wants it more, especially when it's two teams who are. I mean, I would say they're both pretty good teams. The Vikings don't look it record-wise, but a lot of that is due to playing with 4 different quarterbacks and lack of continuity everywhere. I think the Lions are the better team, generally speaking, but when I look at this game, I'm just gonna jump right into some of this stuff. The one thing that I looked into a little bit, and this doesn't have a ton of statistical significance anymore, just given the time that has passed, but Jared Goff has played against Brian Flores defenses 3 times. One was in the Super Bowl. 2 were regular season games. One one when he was defensive coach for the Patriots and one when he was the head coach for the Dolphins. And he's been really bad against Brian Flores. Really bad. Like, astonishingly bad, partly because none of these games were in domes. We know Jared Goff is a dome menace, but 52% completion percentage, about 250 yards a game. Some of that is inflated in one game where they were getting blown out and it was garbage time.
Right.
But 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 58 quarterback rating, 10 sacks, only 30 scored points over 3 total games. All of them were losses. So I say that not because it's a prediction that Jared Goff is going to melt against Brian Flores and he's not going to know what to do. I say that more just to highlight the fact of what Brian Flores has done to Jared Goff in the past and how he might have a little bit of special sauce to mess with the Lions a little bit and make this more difficult on him than other teams have. You know, one of the best offenses in the league.
Yeah, what stands out to me, and I just looked this up to like verify it, and it's actually shockingly kind of true. The Lions kind of front run a little bit. Like, because if you look at their wins, you're talking like there's a lot of 2-possession, 3-possession wins on their resume this season. There's also a 38-6 loss to the Ravens. There's also a 7-point loss to Green Bay on Thanksgiving that did not feel like it was close. That game felt like Green Bay had them by the throat and was not letting up. And then there was a 15-point loss to Chicago on there, and that's not to take away. Chicago is like that loss to Chicago still hurts, and we should be like kind of salty about it. But Chicago's been playing some pretty decent football over the last month, so let's not all freak out like we lost to the 0-16 Cleveland Browns or something. Or you know, who's another team that went 0-16? Oh yeah, the Detroit Lions.
The Lions.
But then like they lose by 15 to Chicago, and then they come back at home and they stomp the Broncos on national TV. By 25. Like it feels like, and look, they do have some like 3-point wins sprinkled in there and a couple of close losses, but like it feels like they either lose by a lot or they blow your doors off, and there's really very little in between. So that leads me to say that if the Vikings can find a way to get pressure on Goff, make him get the ball out early and jump a route or two, this game could very quickly snowball into like a very fun Christmas Eve for Minnesota. Now, flip side, the Vikings don't get pressure because the Lions built their team the correct way by building from the ball out instead of the out to the ball. If we don't get pressure and Goff has some time, this game could very easily ruin some Christmas parties and get some fathers drunk before Christmas. And it could be a rough Christmas Eve for us Vikings fans. So I'm not going to say it yet because I'm going to let you do your score prediction first. But my score prediction is a 2-possession endeavor.
Interesting.
For one of these two teams. Of course, we've got Goff in the Dome. I will say, because I have to say this, my matchup to watch, I'll just go ahead and do my game ball here too. My matchup to watch is that it's Detroit's offensive line against the Vikings pass rush. That includes blitzers, whether that be Harrison Smith, Ivan Pace, Josh Metellus, whoever it is. Anybody that's rushing Jared Goff, that's who it's going to be. And I don't know if you remember this, but this was one of the most fun shows I've done in my history of doing Load the Box. Do you remember the Danielle Hunter 7-sack game against Detroit a few years ago?
Oh, was that 2019?
I think it was the year before COVID. It was, I think he had 7. He might have had 6, but he had a lot. And I was dumbfounded. So I'm going to give my game ball to Danielle Hunter, who now has a career high in sacks this season as a 29-year-old on a restructured contract. The Vikings are going to be in a bidding war for old Danielle Hunter as the uninformed would call him. But Daniil's having a great year, just an absolutely rock solid year. He's now proven that he can play as a hand in the ground, 4-3 edge, as well as playing as a stand-up pass rushing linebacker. He is truly just a great pass rusher. It is a shame that he had so many years taken from him due to, I don't even want to say like the same injury because it wasn't, right? I mean, it was just a couple of different things that didn't break his way. So I'm going to give my game ball to Danielle Hunter, who I think has is going to have a big day if the Vikings want to, come out of this one with a 2-possession W. I'll save my score prediction for a little bit. I'll pass it off to you.
Love it. I just want to say, too, you are on point with the Danielle Hunter versus the Lions thing. His career high in sacks is 3.5, so it's high. Not 7, but it's high. It was against the Lions. It was 2018. Do some research. His second highest game was also against the Lions, 2019. He had 3 sacks. So he's good at getting after the Lions quarterbacks. I also just want to say about Danielle Hunter, since you went on the little rant about him. I very mistakenly wrote an article this summer about the Vikings, needing to take caution in pursuing an extension with Danielle Hunter. I could not have been more wrong, so shame on me. He deserves to be paid and needs to stick around for a while. He's not slowing down anytime soon. So all that being said, on my side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, I'm sticking with the revenge game narrative from last week. I had the Ivan Pace game ball. That did not work out terribly well against the Bengals. He was unable to stop a Joe Mixon touchdown on 4th down. That sort of turned the tide of the game in the 4th quarter. Had a few other missed tackles. Not his best showing back at home, but for me, I'm going TJ Hawkinson. It's his old squad. It's I guess it'd be his second time playing against them. One thing I noticed about the Lions, they're not a very good pass defense. They're really good at preventing the run. They're one of the top run defenses in the NFL, top 6, top 10, somewhere in there. But the pass defense isn't great. And the other thing about Hawkinson and this game is he is 9 receptions and 98 yards away from 100 receptions and 1,000 on the season. So he's really close to 2 sort of milestones there. I think they already are both career highs. I don't think he's even in need, if you will, of breaking any career highs. But I see this as a big game for him. And I think he's going to sniff those 100 and 1,000 milestones, and I think he's going to go get them. So that's my guy. That's my game ball. I guess I'm a little bit wrong. He did have 914 yards last year, so he'll pass that on the first series of the game this week.
I have to correct myself, and I'm probably going to get made fun of for saying that Danielle Hunter had 7 sacks, because that's a Madden stat. I think the game record for sacks is like 5. The team had 10 sacks, and Danielle Hunter, let me know how many sacks this counts for. He did have a scoop and score in that game. So Danielle Hunter had 3.5 sacks and a touchdown.
Good.
Let's just round that up to 7 sacks. Okay, I think it was 6 points and 3.5, and everyone knows that you round 0.5 up. So, okay, that's kind of right. But yeah, the team had 10 sacks. Danielle Hunter led them in that. But yeah,
I will say as well, to give you a little bit more credit, he only played 70% of the snaps that day. So if he would have played all of, but if he would have played the entire game, maybe that 7 would have been attained.
I think it very well could have. That was a very fun game. It also, I just read like an article from the Pioneer Press, and I guess Dalvin Cook had a 70-yard run in that game that was not for a touchdown. And Zimmo, old Zim, who I love, said after the game, he said he kept it in fourth gear because he was thinking about his hamstring. Hopefully there's another gear in there somewhere. Just classic Mike Zimmer. Celebrating a 2-possession win over a division rival where you had 10 sacks and you say my running back didn't run fast enough, damn it. Like, God, I love it. But yeah, so I'm going with, can you give me your score prediction one more time so I can jot that down?
I didn't even give the score prediction. You were so deep in the stats that you didn't even get my score prediction. I'm going with the Vikings. Last week I said that I believed week 18 would decide the division, and I still believe that. It seems like a long shot considering the Lions have 10 wins, the Vikings have 7, there's only 3 games left. But there's not a whole lot that really has to happen. If the Vikings beat the Lions and then they just take care of the Packers at home in week 17, for all intents and purposes, the Cowboys are going to lose to Dallas. They're not going to go win in Jerry World. That doesn't happen. And so if the Vikings win on Christmas Eve, as long as they take care of their business against the Packers, week 18 will be for the division, and I still think that's going to happen. And so the other thing that I want to mention with this, the Lions, like you said, are front runners. They love blowing out bad teams. When they play below average defenses, they score 32 points a game. And when I'm saying below average, it's literally, I just cut it in half. So like 17 to 32 based on expected points. The Lions score 32 points a game against those guys. When they play top 16 or top half defenses, they only score 21 points a game. And the Vikings are in the top 10, basically in sort of every sort of meaningful category, maybe top 13 or something if it bleeds a little bit with yardage or something. But the Vikings aren't going to give up 37 or 42 like Denver did on Saturday night to the Lions. They're going to win 27-23. I'm taking the Vikings sort of every game's a one-score game approach rather than the Lions every game is a blowout approach. This is a t-shirt and hat game. Last year, week 14 at Detroit, the Vikings had an opportunity to end the division on the road against a division opponent, and they couldn't do it. This year, it's literally the reverse. It's week 16. It's at Minnesota. The Lions have an opportunity to close out the division, and they're not going to do it. It's going to be one of those very sad things where the T-shirts and hats have to get sent back to Detroit because they know they're not going to win in Dallas, and so they're going to have to send them back for Detroit for week 18. That's going to be at 27-23. The Vikings are going to win.
I love it, and I love when we disagree because I lied. I said it was going to be a 2-score game. It's a 3-score game. The Vikings are losing 31-10. Blowout. Blowout. The Vikings getting pummeled. I've seen it before where we all get together. And I know this isn't Christmas Day, but it's close enough, right? We get together with our loved ones and we open presents and we give gifts. And I have a very good gift for my brother that I'm very excited to put on the show's Twitter whenever I gift it to him. But spoilers, Josh, if you're watching this, your present is Vikings related. It was that or golf. Those are what we have in common. But I just think that the Vikings, it's almost this going against my gut thing that I love to do so much, where I feel like, okay, the Vikings defense just had a bad day and the offense figured it out. So in my mind, my gut says the defense will figure it out. The offense, it'll be a 1-score game. They'll keep it close. It's kind of same path that you took. I'm just going to go ahead and say the Lions know that they have this game and then a very difficult road game against potentially the 1 seed, and then basically this game, but a couple hours away, like this time at home. And so they know, let's not play games. Let's not mess around with, one game to either be a wild card or be a division loser. Let's get it out of the way now. I think they're coming in motivated. They are humming. They're firing on all cylinders offensively. I'm not saying they took us to the cleaners with the Hawkinson trade. I think that was like a Diggs trade where you can say both sides win. But the fact that they now have Sam Laporta on their team and he's just a touchdown machine does make it seem like they made a good decision on moving on from TJ Hawkinson and getting Sam Laporta. And so I think that, I just see that I don't see them scoring 30 on us, if that's a benefit. I just think Nick Mullins is going to continue to be chaotic, and I'm going to lean into the Nick Mullins chaos will not be so beneficial this time around. And if he throws a jump ball to a small receiver, like, who knows? He'll probably throw like a jump ball to Brandon Powell this week, and we'll all say, "What are you doing?" And he'll say, "It's the exact throw I made last week. It's just Brandon Powell. He's like 6 inches shorter." And Kevin O'Connell will call 5 tush pushes, and it all bound down. I don't know. I put on the thing, it's going across right now, all hope lost, abandoned ship. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now emotionally. I'll very briefly give my final thoughts. Of course, as always, like I tell you every week, follow the show on Twitter at LTB Vikings, and make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, on the YouTube. We post weekly unless we're sad, and then we don't. It's actually usually because, day jobs, but we're trying to grow and to do this more regularly, and we love doing it. Make sure you follow this guy. He's over here, at Will Bad Lose, and check out his Bad Loser blog. It's just top grade A stuff, except for his MLB baseball power rankings, which will just a little
disrespectful to bank.
A little disrespectful.
Whatever you guys call it over there.
Great American Ballpark. All right, I can't remember his name.
I suppose
there's a radio host who got Tracy something. I can't think of his name. This doesn't matter. You guys listening to this are from Minnesota. Tracy Jones is a radio person in Minnesota or in Ohio, and he goes by the Great American. So every time the Reds play, he says they're down at my ballpark, because Great American is an insurance group, and also Tracy Jones. But very just. I mean, we have a boat in the stadium. In the stadium, there's a boat with smokestacks and everything. It's whatever. I'm over it. But yeah, make sure you follow that. My final thoughts are just going to be, I want to be wrong. I'm obviously going into the hyperbolic. Whenever you pick a 3-score loss, you're kind of going hyperbolic. I want to be wrong. I want this game to be competitive. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I want them to lose big, so they have to stout Jaron Hall. I'm not doing anything like that. I want everyone to stay healthy. I want the Vikings to play good football, and I want these last 2 weeks to matter. I don't want to limp into the playoffs. I want to win 2 of these last 3, make the playoffs, maybe shock a team or 2 in the playoffs. Who knows once you get in the dance, but I do know, looking back, hindsight, that Giants game, it was devastating in the moment. It was a fun season last year, regardless of the fact that it didn't end with a ring, like how everybody wants it to end. I'm okay with the Vikings making the playoffs and losing in the first round. It's fun. There's a different atmosphere. Everyone wants to talk about your team because it's the playoffs. And for me, that means a lot because I live in Cincinnati. So, I want the Vikings to be good, and I don't care what I have to do to make them good. I will continue to jinx them and hex them and do voodoo over them until they win me a Super Bowl, or at least have an exciting season. This season's been nothing short, and that's a miracle, being all the injuries that they've had. But we're in the home stretch now. 3 to go. Drink it in. Enjoy it, because if all you're doing is complaining on Twitter right now, I don't want to hear a lick out of you during baseball season about how badly you miss football, because it's on right now. It might not be great, but it's on. And other than that, when's the next time we're going to do a show? It will not be before the college football playoff, so I'll save my college football playoff takes. We'll bury those, and I'll make sure to give myself more time next week. I'm rambling at this point. That was me. Will, I'll pass it off to you. Those were the worst final thoughts ever.
Wonderful. No, we've had worse. I think there's been a few weeks where we've each had about 3 final thoughts. So I think that was actually pretty efficient. My final thoughts are to continue with my positive. I mean, you could call this positive, you could call this downer, depending on the way you look at it. I was sitting there thinking the other day, I think this might have even been before the Cincinnati game, might have been during the Cincinnati game, might have been after. Before the season, Jordan, your prediction for this team was to win the Super Bowl. And I think, we were sitting on that show, and I was kind of like, whoa, okay. And I wasn't on board with you. I was thinking, I don't know, maybe one playoff win is our ceiling. I wasn't so sure how the defense would improve, even with a hopefully different and better defensive coach. You can't really I mean, it's hard to improve from 32nd or whatever they were last year and to a meaningful position to where they can actually compete to win playoff games. I was very wrong about that. And as I was sitting there on the afternoon of Saturday-ish, I truly believe for the first time in my Vikings fandom life that the Vikings would have won the Super Bowl this year had Kirk Cousins not tore his Achilles. And I know that sounds sort of, I don't know, wishful thinking and like, oh, it's a coping mechanism because, now they're 7-7, just trying to hang on to dear life with 19 different quarterbacks and um, all that, everything that's gone on with this team, Justin Jefferson missing half the games and everything. But the way that this defense is humming, generally, Cincinnati game notwithstanding, and the way the offensive line has improved, the way the running game has gotten going these last couple games, and simply put, the way that Kirk Cousins was playing those 3 weeks or so leading up to, I mean, really the whole season, but especially those last couple weeks leading up to his injury, this team had the ingredients to make a Super Bowl run, and I truly believe that they would have won it this year. And it's just it's too bad, but it's also something that I kind of look at as like this team is not anywhere near rebuild mode. This team is in a position to continue to stay competitive, and um, so do with that what you will, Vikings fans. But those are my thoughts. Um, it's a very audacious thought, and it's very rich of me to say, given that the Vikings are hoping to cling to a playoff spot, and especially considering they started 0-3. But the way this team was playing, the way they have now sort of matured on defense, and all those other things, the offensive line, the quarterback play, this could have been the year. So, for all of us here at Load the Box, it still could be the year. Have hope. Merry Christmas, everybody. Skol, y'all.